right, let's try this again. Had some internet problems last time. All right, we are returning to the Rockford reading of Why We Can't Wait by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. For anybody who has tuned in to these Rockford readings before, they you know the gist, but for anybody who may be tuning in for the first time, I'll just go over the gist of what it is that we do at the Rockford reading. The May 30th Alliance reads through a piece of literature, and while reading through that piece of literature, we cross-reference how the things being mentioned in that book interrelate to issues that we're dealing with presently in Rockford, Illinois, and how we can use the things being written about to assist us in the struggle to end police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice. All right, so let's see where we're at. We're on chapter 7, page 133. More than 25 years ago, one of the southern states adopted a new method of capital punishment. Poison gas supplanted the gallows. In its earliest stages, a microphone was placed inside the sealed death chamber so that the scientific observers might hear the words of the dying prisoner to judge how the human reacted in this novel situation. The first victim was a young black boy. As the pellet dropped into the container and the gas curled upward, through the microphone came these words, quote, "Save me, Joe Louis. Save me, Joe Louis. Save me, Joe Louis," end quote. It is heartbreaking enough to ponder the last words of any person dying by force. It is even more poignant to contemplate the words of this boy because they reveal the helplessness, the loneliness, and the profound despair of black people in that period. The condemned young black boy, groping for someone who might care for him, had power enough to rescue him, found only the heavyweight boxing champion of the world. Joe Louis would care because he was a black person. Joe Louis could do something because he was a fighter. In a few words, the dying man had written a social commentary. Not God, not government, not charitably minded white men, but a black person who was the world's most expert fighter in this last extremity was the last hope. Less than 3 decades later, black people have discovered the fighting spirit and the power each within themselves. Voluntarily facing death in many places, they have relied upon their own united ranks for strength and protection. In the summer of 1963, the bizarre and naive cry to Joe Louis was replaced by a mighty shout of challenge. Helplessness was replaced by confidence as hundreds of thousands of black people discovered that organization, together with nonviolent direct action, was explosively, powerfully, and socially transforming. As if to dramatize the change, that summer in Birmingham, another black world heavyweight champion appeared to the turbulent scene. Floyd Patterson came to Birmingham not as a savior, but because he felt he belonged with his people. At no moment in his pugilistic career was Patterson more of a champion than the day he appeared, far from his comfortable home, to give heart to the plain people who were engaged in another kind of bruising combat. To measure the gains of the summer by doing some social bookkeeping, to add up the thousands of integrated restaurants, hotels, parks, and swimming pools, to total the new job openings, to list the towns and cities where the victory banners now float, would be to tell less than the whole story. The full dimensions of victory can be found only by comprehending the change within the minds of millions of black people. From the depths in which the spirit of freedom was imprisoned, an impulse for liberty burst through. The black people became, in their own estimation, the equal of any man. In the summer of 1963, the black people of America wrote an Emancipation Proclamation to themselves. They shook off 300 years of psychological slavery and said, quote, "We can make ourselves free," end quote. I think that that's something that's I want to expound upon, because I believe that the city that we live in this no more apparent than from this some of the things that have happened around this Juneteenth event going on. The psychological slavery is very deep in this community. And that's something that I believe in all, and it's different levels of it in multiple and different communities. And that's not to disparage or anything like that. And and again, I say this, the psychological slavery that was and things that are still within me that I'm trying to unlearn and then relearn more within me. I have stopped my life because of the depths of my belief, and because of, I believe this moment that we are in is bigger than any individual person. And I believe that whatever it is that an individual person may be called upon to sacrifice or to do in this moment is minuscule, whatever it is in the grand scheme of what can be gained, in the grand scheme of the moment in time we are in. And so I have had the privilege of being of having people who family and loved ones and people who care about me, who have assisted me in this transition in my life. And so but I understand that with that transition, it's been 13 to 14 months of me doing nothing but educating myself about these things, informing myself more about these things, interacting with the people. And again, I'm speaking about police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice, interacting with the people who in which have dealt with these things firsthand. And even myself, I have become a part of this system in a very intimate way. It's things that I have learned from going in and out of this the jail system and the legal system that a million books couldn't have taught me. And talking to people inside the jail, it was worth reading a book. It's different elders in which that I met, which each time I speak to them is opening up a new chapter in a book. And so I've been privileged to be able to become more educated about these things. And so I've been able to break off a lot of those chains of psychological slavery. It's taken a lot of fighting to break out those chains of psychological slavery. It's taken a lot of struggling to break out those chains of psychological slavery. And because I used to have some of those chains of psychological slavery, I can recognize them in other people. I can recognize when black people don't see other black people in the same light that they see white people in, and when black people value the allegiance of white people over the commitment to their own people, and when black people value just going along to get along more than they value disrupting things that are unjust. Those are psychological effects of slavery. I was talking to somebody today about how if you and again, that's not to say that I'm not saying this to say that any city individually is better, the people are better, or the people are, it's not a person thing. I'm talking about the culture and the society in which some of these communities exist. But I was talking to somebody today about how if you took the black people that were in Atlanta right now and brought them to Rockford, they would not go for the things that black people consistently allowed to happen to them here, because of how much of the psychological slavery has been broken there. And that's not to say that they don't have manners of psychological slavery. There's no place in this country in which it's black people that exist in the community that don't have the effects of psychological slavery around them. But it is to say that there are certain communities and certain places in which black people consciously, and the collective conscience of the community has progressed, allowing certain things to happen to them, has progressed allowing themselves to be manipulated in certain ways, have progressed from allowing even white people to have black people be the face of the manipulation. But that psychological slavery is yet to be broken in Rockford. That psychological slavery is so deep that they think that they can arrest their way through it. The white people that live in this that not only live in this community, but the white people who have power in this community, they believe that just by using imprisonment, which is enslavement, which is 21st century enslavement, the new Jim Crow, that they can get people to stop advocating over issues that predominantly affect black people. because that's how psychological slavery would work, was you would give some type of penalty, you do some type of a punishment. You don't try to fix the root issue or try to have some type of, like you would do with somebody who you equally value. If they equally valued these things, then you would try to have a conversation. You would try to have a compromise. But again, if that was something that they value doing, we would have multiple, at least 1 or 2 officers that done did at least a year or 2 years for action that they've done against community members here. That would be a form of impeachment. I think these batteries getting low. I have to change the batteries. But I need to get back to reading anyways. But hold on, let me hear something real quick. Batteries. I'm going to change the batteries. Fireworks. Everybody letting off the fireworks. That's what's up, I guess. I don't know, man. They trying to make me seem like I'm the Juneteenth Grinch. That's how they trying to make it seem, like I'm the Juneteenth Grinch. I'm not the Juneteenth Grinch. I'm the Coon-teenth Grinch. And like I said, I don't know. Is we out here celebrating Juneteenth or Coon-teenth? Understand that I use the word coon as a political term. It's not a epithet or a slur or in a degradation or Sambo. I was recommended I should start using the word Sambo. All right, y'all. Let's dive back into this. The old order ends no matter what bastilles remain, when the enslaved within themselves bury the psychology of servitude. Whew. He in his bag. All right. This is what happened last year in the unseen chambers of millions of minds. This was the invisible but vast field of victory. Quote, "Am I just imagining it?" End quote, asked the white business executive. Quote, "Or are the black people I see around town walking a little straighter these days?" End quote. Quote, "It makes you feel this way," said a black organizational leader. Quote, "At last, by God, at last." End quote. For hundreds of years, the quiet sobbing of an oppressed people had been unheard by millions of white Americans. The bitterness of the black people's lives remote and unfelt except by a sensitive few. Suddenly last summer, the silence was broken. The lament became a shout and then a roar, and for months no American, white or black, was insulated or unaware. And see, that's, again, this is a thing that I don't think people really, because it's not, these things aren't taught heavily in schools, and because these things aren't in the curriculum, there's a vast misunderstanding of what objectives are meant to be reached with protesting and with demonstrating. And there's people who you know, I'm sure think they wonder, why are we still here? We should go home. What's the reasoning that we're still here? But I think that, you know, and that's why I think that doing some of these readings are important, because I want to point out right here when Dr. King says, "Suddenly last summer, the silence was broken. The lament became a shout and then a roar, and for months, no American, white or black, was insulated or unaware." No American. He didn't quantify that by saying, again, black and white was the term used in here, and nowadays, you know, it would be a lot of more demographics that, or a lot different other communities that would needed to be added into there. But the point that is being made is that nobody was kept away from it. No place was too good to be protested at. No place was too good to be demonstrated at. Nobody was too young to see a protest. Nobody was too young to participate in a protest. It wasn't a picking a time and a place thing. It became the thing. It became the thing. And once something you have to understand how our society works if you are trying to make societal changes. And the way society works is that things come and go. Fads come and go. I remember one of the things that was very interesting for me growing up was finding out how many people thought that, hip hop music wouldn't stay around, that they thought rap music would just be a fad. People saying, that when it was first coming around, they talked to family members and that family members would say it would be going eventually. But the reason that it didn't just end up going away, it didn't become just a fad, is because people continued with it. It's because people persevered, and people it didn't stop. You didn't turn back, and that's how it is with anything, is that when you start doing something, if you continue with it, if you don't allow it to be something that's here today and gone tomorrow, then it becomes imprinted onto the consciousness of the society, and it becomes part of the society, and in the community and the people in the society, they change the way they view certain things, and they change the way they think about certain things. And we can, not only can we, but we will get to a point as a community in which, when someone is shot by a police officer, people stop what they are doing to figure out what they have to do to make sure this police officer is held accountable. We will get to a point where people stop trying to figure out a way to justify the officer shooting this citizen, and start trying to figure out a way to empathize with the individual who has just been victimized. Because people aren't born this way. This is not an instinctual thing. This is these thought patterns are habits. This lethargy is a habit. These habits not only can they be broken, they will be broken. So but they're broken through consistency. Just like with any relationship, when you're in a relationship with somebody, you want consistency. And consistency is not just doing something for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or 12 months. And again, everybody does different. We all have to wage the revolution in the level in which we exist. I'm never condemning somebody for waging the revolution in the level in which they exist, but we have to be waging the revolution. White America was forced to face the ugly facts of life as the black people thrust themselves into the consciousness of the country and dramatized their grievances on 1,000 brightly lighted stages. No period in American history, save the Civil War and the Reconstruction era, records such breadth and depth to the black people's drive to alter their life. No period records so many thaws in the frozen patterns of segregation. It would have been pleasant to relate that Birmingham settled down after the storm and moved constructively to justify the hopes of the many who wished it well. It would have been pleasant, but it would not be true. After partial and grudging compliance with some of the settlement terms, the 20th century Night Riders had yet another bloodthirsty turn on the stage. On one horror-filled September morning, they blasted the lives from 4 innocent girls studying in their Sunday school class. Police killed another child in the streets, and hate-filled white youths climaxed the day with the wanton murder of a black boy harmlessly riding his bicycle. And so this is, and I just want to point this out again, this is 1963. Think about this. This is 1963. And Dr. King is saying the police killed another child in the streets. And it's black people out here celebrating Juneteenth. Think about that. In 1963, in this book, in which the main issue here is not police terrorism. That is a thing that is happening, but this is about trying to end segregation. But still, you see, this police terrorism has been inflicted onto our community in this nation since the inception. And it has not gotten better. It has been more publicized. It's more viewed now. But this is Dr. King saying, police killed another child in the streets. He's saying another in 1963. It's 2021. It's 2021. And he's saying another in 1963. It's 2021. And this is a piece of paper in which I'm charged with a crime for filming and protesting white people destroying memorials of black people who've been killed by the police in 2021. And that's why it's important for us to read these books. That's why it's important for us to listen to these speeches. Too often in our community, we fear knowledge. Too often. These were terrible deeds, but they are strangely less terrible than the response of the dominant white community. If humane people expected the local leadership to express remorse, they were to be disappointed. If they hoped that a sense of atonement would quicken the pace of constructive change, the hope was destined to die a cold death. Instead, the small beginnings of goodwill seemed to wither. The city council adamantly refused to appoint black policemen. Think about that. And this is one of the things that I have said religiously. In 1963, they was trying to fight because they thought that if they could get black people to be police officers, it would change the institution of policing and they would stop having black people being killed by the police, right? And every police department fought tooth and nail against it. Think about that. When you talk to black police officers, ask them if they know that the institution which they part of fought tooth and nail to make sure that they couldn't be part of it. The city council was all right, let's just. Too often as black people, we think it's good to get things that have been denied to us. Not considering the fact that if something is being denied to you because of your blackness, what is it signifying if you go to it once it's no longer being denied, once they're accepting of your blackness? What does that, what does that signify? Should the restaurant be segregated? No. But do I want to eat in that current restaurant that just became desegregated? Or do I want to wait for somebody else to build a different restaurant and then that never had no segregation on it at all, and maybe I deal with that? Those black men as police officers, black women as police officers could have went and been teachers, could have been entrepreneurs that built organizations that kept black people from being cycled into this corrupt legal system. Instead, they became part of that legal system. Instead, they became the slave catchers. We need to encourage more of our black young people to be building the Underground Railroad, not to becoming part of the slave catching brigade. The merchants took a few steps forward with the limited terms of the settlement, but construed it as narrowly as possible. The city did segregate the library, the golf course, and later the schools and public buildings, all of which were beyond the scope of the agreement. Yet a bleakness of spirit militated against wholehearted progress. Perhaps the poverty of conscience of the white majority was most clearly illustrated at the funeral of the child martyrs. No white official attended. No white faces could be seen, save for pathetically few courageous ministers. More than children were buried that day. Honor and decency were also interred. A few white voices spoke out boldly, but few people listened with sympathy. The speech of Charles Morgan, delivered in the aftermath of the Sunday school bombing, was a brave indictment of collective guilt. As a result of his forthrightness, Morgan, a prominent lawyer, was forced to abandon his practice and, with his wife and family, to leave the state. Looking away from the political leaders, Birmingham's black people sought from industry a sign that it would encourage meaningful action in the spirit of the May Agreement. The industry leaders were not only independent and capable, but their ownership was largely located in the North. U.S. Steel does not have to fear Southern hate-mongers. It is an economic oligarchy of giant power not only in Birmingham, but in the nation and the world. After months, its chairman, Roger Blue, declared from New York that despite U.S. Steel's preeminence in Birmingham, it would be improper for the corporation to seek to influence community policies and race relations. "We have fulfilled our responsibility in the Birmingham area," he said. "If the community had enacted unreasonable taxes or ordinances adversely affecting production, there is no doubt that the power of U.S. Steel would have been swiftly unleashed to determine a different result. Profits were not affected by racial injustice. Indeed, they were benefited. Only people were hurt, and the greatest single power in Birmingham turned its back." At this point, many observers began to charge that Birmingham had become the Waterloo of nonviolent direct action. The question had to be faced whether white resistance was so reluctant that all the heroism, daring, and sacrifice of black people had ended, in Eliot's words, quote, "not with a bang, but a whimper," end quote. 175 years ago, ordinary New England farmers tried to hold a hill against brilliantly trained English troops. The American farmers were outgunned and outnumbered. They had no military training and no military discipline, but they broke 2 British charges on sheer nerve and spirit. Finally, running out of gunpowder, they were routed. The army of King George held the hill, but Bunker Hill became a shrine of the American Revolution, and in the years of the Revolution that followed, wherever the embattled colonists marched, the Battle of Bunker Hill was an inspiration for victory. The climaxing victory at Yorktown is less well remembered than the valiant stand on the heights over Boston. At Bunker Hill, the, quote, rabble, end quote, became an army. The British won the hill, but the colonists won their self-respect and the profound respect of their enemy. In the succeeding years of the war, the British would never again attempt to take a fortified position from the Americans. The vanquished won the war on that hill. The victors lost it. Again, that is what I think we have to start. That's why we have to understand the importance of history, the importance that being on the right side of history has, the importance of being in things for the long run and not for short term that those things have. And when you understand what those things have, when you understand the importance that those things have, you understand that in the short term, some of these power structures may be succeeding. Some of these, what's up? Some of these power structures may be getting what they desire by having people arrested, having people put in jail. But in the long term, what will those things look like? What will this city, when the story of this city is told, and it's told that people are given $750 fines for memorials, for each memorial, that people were arrested for protesting about memorials being torn down. How will that look in history books? And that is what's going on right now in Rockford, Illinois. No matter how many people are aware of it or not aware of it, Rockford, Illinois is, for using this metaphor, for this example that Dr. King has given, is Bunker Hill. And so whether or not in the moment that we are in right now, we are succeeding in this, or not, I shouldn't say succeeding, I believe we are succeeding. That's the reason that they're doing these arrests, is because we are succeeding. That's the reason that they're trying to not be filmed and trying to not be documented doing these despicable, inhumane acts, is because we are succeeding. But whether or not, the perception is that we are having victory in this exact moment in the struggle against police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice is irrelevant, because we have to understand that the future lasts longer than the present. The future lasts longer than the present, and history is written in the future. History lies in the future. And so where in that history, in that future, where all of these things lie, where all of these things are, we are on the right side. So again, but that's why, again, understanding that, I've been forced to see, I was, in jail last night, for a couple of hours. Even though they may feel in that moment like that is a loss, that is truly a victory. And so again, in the moments at Bunker Hill, even though it may feel like it is a loss, it is truly a victory. And so when Dr. King says, the vanquished won the war on that hill, the victors lost it, that's the same type of mindset that we have to have in the struggle that we're waging here in Rockford, Illinois. What's up? How you doing, bro? How you doing? You doing all right? I'm gonna run through this chapter. And then we do a live. We do the, yeah. Okay, let's run back through this. Birmingham was different only in the sense that the black people did not retreat and they won some significant gains. The desegregation of lunch counters, libraries, schools on a token basis may seem a small breach in the enormous fortress of injustice, but considering the strength of the fortress, it was a towering achievement. And Birmingham did more than this. It was a fuse. It detonated a revolution that went on to win scores of other victories. And so that's the same. Again, this is the same mindset that we have to have. I 100% believe that one day, somebody, a historian, a reporter, a journalist, a novelist, someone will say the same thing about Rockford, Illinois. I believe that they will say, Rockford did more than this. It was a fuse. It detonated a revolution that went on to win scores of other victories. And I believe that is where we're at right now. There is a lull in Birmingham at this writing. My preference would have been to resume demonstrations in the wake of the September bombings. I want people to understand this, that this is another understanding of demonstrations and protests, is that when certain actions happen, you respond to those things. So when people are arrested and we do an action to respond to that, that is not being done out of emotion. That's not being done out of not being tactical. That is being done out of tact. That is being done out of logic. That is being done because you have to understand the type of situation in which you are in. And every time that there is an action, there must be an equal and opposite reaction. That's Isaac Newton's law. I think that's Newton's law. And so again, when this bombing took place, Dr. King was ready to go back and do demonstrations again, because that is the nature of the protests and the demonstrations, is that if these things, right now we stand in a time in which, in this week, the findings will come out justifying the murder of Faustin Guaitigo and the shooting of Jose Gonzalez Jr., a 19-year-old young man who was shot while he was running away. There must be a community reaction to that. And the lack of a reaction is a reaction within itself. And that signifies to these corrupt, bloodthirsty, racist, inhumane institutions that they can continue in their corruptness, in their inhumaneness, in their bloodthirstiness, in their bloodlust, and in their destruction of our children. And again, we just read in 1963, Dr. King talking about another child shot in the streets. That was one of the things that was leading up to being the catalyst to him going back, was that police lynching people in the streets. And it's 2021 in Rockford, Illinois. What are we doing about the lynching of our children in the streets by these corrupt Ku Klux cops? There is a lull in Birmingham at this writing. My preference would have been to resume demonstrations in the wake of the September bombings, and I strongly urged militant action without delay. Strongly urged militant action without delay. That's not that. You ever heard that quote? You ever heard that quote attributed to Dr. King before? But some of those in our movement held other views. Against the formidable adversaries we faced, the fullest unity was indispensable, and I yielded. The Birmingham power structure still has an opportunity to fulfill its promises voluntarily. Whether it will act willingly or only after renewed demonstrations is for white Birmingham to determine. That it will finally have to act is as certain as the fact that Bunker Hill is today part of the United States of America. There have been no general staff of the revolution and no national plan of operations. There could be no reliable records to compute the gains. Yet no one could doubt that as the black people left 1963 behind, they had taken the longest and fastest leap forward in a century. No revolution is executed like a ballet. Its steps and gestures are not neatly designed and precisely performed. In our movement, the spontaneity of its pattern was particularly evident. Injustice, discrimination, and humiliation stood on every street corner in every town, north and south. The selection of target cities was random. Wherever there was creative black leadership, wherever the white power structure responded clumsily and arrogantly, there a new storm center whirled into being. Now again, excuse me, y'all, my fault. Again, it's important for us to pay attention to what the words that are being expounded. Wherever the white power structure responded clumsily and arrogantly, there a new storm sent her world into being. And that is what was going on here in Rockford, Illinois. We're at the center of a storm. And this is the white people in the white power structure acting clumsily and arrogantly. This is Jessica Schaefer, Amy Summerfeld, Stephanie Pevy, Brandon Cruz, Kyle Saunders, and Melissa Mason. All white people that are employed by this white power structure acting clumsily and arrogantly and having non-white people arrested for protesting them as they destroy memorials. We are in the center of a storm here in Rockford, Illinois. Some cities embroiled in the conflict were by no means the worst offenders. Savannah, Atlanta, Nashville were well in advance of other southern communities, but they were not spared. The experienced black leadership simply determined to take a longer step forward in these localities. In a host of other communities, the protests represented only the beginning, and by the time the demonstrations had ended, only a partial victory had been won. Yet for these cities, the beginning was a long and satisfactory distance from nothing. But in some places, the white power structure had frozen into position. Injustice was not an evil to be corrected even partially. It was an institution to be defended. Against the nonviolent army, the segregationists marshaled their legions of hatred. America's shame acquired new place names. Oxford, Mississippi. Mobs shrieking for blood attacked federal marshals, and before order is restored, 2 men are dead. Jackson, Mississippi. Medgar Evers, courageous and NAACP secretary, is assassinated from ambush. Gadsden, Alabama. A new and barbarous weapon is introduced for use against black people. The electric cattle prod. Danville, Virginia. Upright white citizens concerned that police brutality is insufficient to intimidate black people begin wearing guns in their belts. Cambridge, Maryland, and Rome, Georgia. Cambridge, Maryland, and Rome, Georgia differ from one another in degrees of bitterness and brutality, but not in attitudes of resistance. From one perspective, these engagements were all defeats for the movement. Yet from another viewpoint, there were intangible elements of victory. Despite the worst these communities could inflict, they could not drive the black people apart. Their blows only served to unite our ranks, stiffen our resistance, and tap our deepest resources of courage. Seen in perspective, the summer of 1963 was historic partly because it witnessed the first offensive in history launched by black people along a broad front. The heroic but spasmodic and isolated slave revolts of the antebellum South have fused, more than a century later, into a simultaneous massive assault against segregation. And the virtues so long regarded as the exclusive property of the white South, gallantry, loyalty, and pride, have passed to the black demonstrators in the heat of the summer's battles. In assessing the summer's events, some observers have tended to diminish the achievements by treating the demonstrations as an end in themselves. The heroism of the marching, the drama of the confrontation became in their minds a total accomplishment. It is true that these elements have meaning, but to ignore the concrete and specific gains in dismantling the structure of segregation is like noticing the beauty of the rain, but failing to see that it has enriched the soil. A social movement that only moves people is merely a revolt. A movement that changes both people and institutions is a revolution. And I think that that's the thing that's important to point out. A social movement that only moves people is merely a revolt. And that's what was taking place last year, a revolt. There was a revolt against the power structure in this city. However, a movement is something that changes both people and institutions, which is a revolution. And whether people want to acknowledge it or not, we have began the process of changing what the institution of the city of Rockford government is like. because the first part in changing it has to be to expose to the world what it truly is, and expose to the city what it truly is. And up until we came out here for this occupation, the masses have been tricked by the masquerade that was being put on by the city government. A little chilly tonight, ain't it? Okay, we on page. I got another one. Oh shit! Yeah, I got my hoodie in my. I'm gonna throw my hoodie on here a little bit. Oh, thought this chapter was a little shorter than this. It's gonna, yeah. You know what? I got Kay here. We got a few things we got to get to today. So we wanted to get this. I got a Rockford reading in. I need to get some different layers on. Kay finna get some extra layers on. We gonna do a live and a podcast. We gonna keep doing the work. That's what we gonna keep doing. That's what we've been doing. So we gonna keep doing through all the BS. We gonna keep doing the work. And so I'm gonna end this live. Get ready to start another one again. We're reading "Why We Can't Wait" by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is about the 1963 movement in Birmingham to end segregation. We're reading these things and cross-referencing how the things that are mentioned in this literature interrelate to the issues that we're facing in Rockford, Illinois currently. So, all right, I'm gonna end this live, and I gotta get a hoodie and some sweatpants or something.
Very
Hello.
intrigued of what you're out here talking about.
Oh, just in talking. I'm gonna end this live.